All right. Yes, we speak of violence at the home setup. Yesterday, I was looking at the newspapers, and there was this whole paged story of men somewhere, in Lamu, in Tana River, and they'll speak of how the situation is bad for them. The home is no longer a safe space for them. There was that report that was released sometimes last year, should have last year also, but when. That's also was projecting a scenario where the home was not a safe space for women. This is because of violence back at home. But then again, there are numerous untold stories that are there, the tough experiences that men are going through. They do not want to speak. And so I was going through this article, and this man speaks of the fact that, they have to suffer in silence simply because, one, you cannot hit this woman, you cannot fight back, because if you do, then the laws are waiting for you. Yeah. And so he speaks of a scenario where, unless you are bringing something at home, unless you're actively participating, you are hit left, right, and center. The shame in society. And so today we discuss that, and we just ask ourselves, just why is it that the home is no longer that safe space, especially at this point of COVID-19. We understand also there are numerous projections as to the numerous cases of violence at the home setup that have cropped up. It is a shadow pandemic. We have discussed this. We continue to discuss this. There are a couple of things that need to be done. And, call to action. What are some of these things that we need to do to ensure that the laws are followed to the letter? And we do not capitalize much on the laws in the sense of protecting the women, and we overlook what it is that the men are going through. How do we get them to come out and speak and say, this is what is happening to me? How do we get them to go out there and protect themselves without countering and probably creating more damage or more harm than actually good? Joining me for this particular conversation is Dr. Jane Kimani, who's a counselor, and we also have Bishop David Dagana. Good to have you, Bishop, after a long time. Good to have you, Dr. Harry. And yes, the conversation is on. Jane, we probably have had this conversation before, but it gets dire by the day.
Yeah. I think, having a problem and there is no solution or nothing actually addressing the issue, and we keep talking about the problems arising, and for some people they feel like, so this is the only outlet I have. Yeah. So and so did it, and some people look at it and think, it's not me alone. So you find if we talk and so much capitalize on the problem without a way out, a solution, how to handle the latent emotions that are bringing out so much pain and are exposing the rot in the society, then we are not sorting out the situation. And many times when I go through the newspapers, I go through perhaps any commentary, documentary on violence, I hardly hear of anybody giving a solution. What should have been done in this situation? We condemn it, and it is right to condemn it, but we never arise and say that in this situation, this is what should have been the solution. So I think now it's a high time where we strengthened, we armed, and we actually, how can I put it, inform our society on what they need to do in case of such a situation.
Yes. Bishop, you have worked, down there in Turkana, in some of these communities that have been looked at as marginalized. Reports again emerge that the cases of violence against men, at the family setup are extremely on the rise. And like I told you, this article that I read, incorporated in one of the dailies, is from the marginalized entities. They were like 4 men who were speaking of this. And so they tend to glory in their own misery, and they speak of these stories and they just leave it at that. To get the confidence and courage to come and speak out and have it captured on the papers is a huge milestone. But still, just what is being done?
Yes, thank you very much. I think this is quite an important subject for us to address. As you have correctly said, in the marginalized areas, the cultural setup there is a little bit different from what we are used to on this other side. And when I started serving among the marginalized in October 2004, I also got very shocked because particularly the cultural shocks. Part of it is that I found the women are the one who do the menu jobs there, what we think are menu jobs on our side.
On our side, yeah.
And I really got shocked, to especially building a house. Everywhere we went in the community those days, I found women going to get the the tiba, the laughter safe, the grass, and they come and do the house. The house. And they then go out and look for food and come and bring the food. So basically the things that we would attribute to men in our culture in the areas that are not marginalized are the ones that are done by women the other side. Now, coming to the situation of the violence, in the same manner, you find because of that position and what the women do in that culture, they stand out more. They are more of outspoken. They are the people who will do what men do here. Now, because even when we come to this other side of our culture here, the reason why the women are kind of more victimized or victims of the violence is again more cultural than anything else.
Okay.
As much as the other factors. So we are in a male-dominated culture where the man, from where we come from, is always a boss, always speaks, is masculine, is strong, he can batter the woman. That is exactly what is happening the other side. So that cultural aspect brings the difference in the two areas.
All right. Well, that's one thing to note. And actually, I was looking at some of these reports. This is not just happening in the country; it is across South Africa itself, and they attribute to some of these crucial things to the cultural setup, or so to speak. Yes, that the man. I mean, sometimes women glory in that, and they say, if he doesn't slap you, then he doesn't love you. That one slap once in a while is necessary, and men would sit in bars, and they pride in that.
Yeah.
Has it gotten to a point where, well, we said we do not have solutions and therefore we should pride in this?
Well, it's not that we don't have solutions. I would like to perhaps go back to what Bishop has said, that in the culture where he was serving, the women actually were wearing the trouser.
That's true.
You get it? The women practically wear the trouser. Yeah. And I discovered that's the same thing that's happening in these areas, and it's also not very well addressed because a lot of men are being beaten, especially by women who wear the trouser. Okay. A woman who feels like, now I've been running the home, you've been doing nothing, you've lost your job, suddenly you're humble back home. I think we need to deal with the root cause of anger. We need to deal with it. There are societies, as you have well said, that feel like, what? Beating is a part of showing I love you. If you don't beat me, then you're not concerned. And that's a very old school mindset. I think we've outgrown that, and we should be outgrowing it. However, we learn from our families of upbringing. And everybody learns from their family of upbringing. Okay. So if we do not bring a change now, our children or the children of their generation will grow to learn that's the way it's supposed to be. And a woman is supposed to be beaten by if perhaps the man feels like he needs to relieve the stress, unless now somebody stands up for a change. And I feel somebody needs to have done it yesterday, before the numbers escalated. Unless somebody now stands up and says enough is enough. No man will be hit again, no woman will be hit again. And this is not what you're talking about, empowering them with knowledge and understanding. The in the Turkana culture or that culture, the marginalized culture, they may not be bringing the bread, but that doesn't mean that he needs to be beaten. That's true. Yeah, because he's not going to be a child, even if he doesn't earn. And I keep saying this, Linda, and perhaps I don't know if we can internalize it very well. For the woman, however educated you are, however good a job you've got, however everything is working well for you, the man remains the head. The man remains the head. Being a head is not a function of money. Being ahead is not a function of what you brought home, of the fact that you paid for school fees. Being ahead is fundamentally the foundation of the home. And so I think we need to understand what is marriage. We need to go back to some basics. Yeah, who is the head? What is it to be the head? You're not the head when you've got the money, so that when you don't have the money, now the woman wears a trouser. And women also, as much as we're being empowered, there's a lot of empowerment on the girl child vis-a-vis the boy child. And that makes the lady feel like, wow, I am too empowered, I can do this, and I know the law. And the laws are very strong for the girl. For the girls, yes. Hit the girl, police will arrest you. And actually, hit the man, and they go to report, and they're laughed at.
Yes, I totally agree with Dr. Jane that if we're going to get solutions to the problem of the domestic violence, it is extremely important that we look at the underlying causes, the root causes. What is it that causes that? I cannot agree any further that the position of the boy child and the girl is critical, because if we are going to build a society and address this problem right from childhood, then we must address that boy-child issue. Now the laws and the position of the man, as she puts it, that needs to be addressed,
right,
where the man is. But we also need to address the systems that we have in the country, the judicial systems.
The judicial systems, the legal systems.
Yes, the legal
systems. But sometimes they don't even work for the girl child. You find that, yes, the laws are there, but the implementation aspect is something that lays foggy up until date. So you find that, yes, you've been battered at home, you've been violated, but really nothing much happens in terms of, getting answers and justice for you, even as a woman.
That's why I'm saying that we need to address the judicial system. And probably we see a bit of right with the appeal Justice Kikome, if she gets approved. Well, based on what we have,
she's big on that.
Based on what we know about her and what we are reading, we see somehow some bit of hope. And in my view, I think we need to look at it from the general perspective, not necessarily boy or girl. Everyone deserves equal justice and treated equally. And when we look at the girl child and being empowered, and the boy child not being empowered, regardless of who has been meted violence on, it is important that they get their justice. And I have a situation in my church where a girl was raped by a man.
Okay. Terrible
situation, very bad. And these are very poor and very weak people. So they didn't know their rights, don't know anything. And so we had to come in and help them to get to know their rights. But even from the point at which the girl says what happened, it is a big problem because of the shame, the stigma. And to the parents' level, they also don't want to handle that shame. So nobody wants to talk about it, and so they would rather cover the whole thing.
Bishop,
now,
you know what
went to the court.
Yes.
Sadly, even as we speak, the victim could not be produced in the court because he was missing. In the hearts of police.
You know what experts say? Experts say that domestic violence is culturally deep-rooted. Fears that the legislation may not be enough alone to decrease the numbers of cases linked to gender-based violence in the country and across. This is technically what Bishop is speaking about.
Agree.
Even if you have all the beautiful laws.
I agree. Do you know what? Before you go to any court of law, it starts with the family.
Yes.
Especially for us, who are marriage therapists, and there's been violence, and the first person this lady will run to is the mother. And we've got a culture that exalts the institution of marriage above the person in marriage. Above the person in marriage. The institution is actually so highly elevated above the people in the marriage, and therefore they can be sacrificial lamb as long as you remain married. And that we can say my daughter is married and not separated or divorced. And therefore most cultures, I did a research on that, most cultures will contend with the fact that you're beaten, and many times they'll tell the lady, go and vumilia to vumilia. The word vumilia has put very many women to the grave. Vumilia, to heal change. Men are like that. Men are not like that.
And even if you go to another one, you still get the same.
And when you go, and when you talk to your aunties, they tell you, ata mimi nilipitia hapo. You get what I'm saying? So you find that most of these cases are not reported, neither are they addressed, because the people who should be reporting or even addressing either the man or the woman, but rarely do men go to report that they've been beaten. Either the man or the woman, you discover that the cases die at that level, and the lady finds, my back has been closed. I don't have a place to lean on. Because the only place I could lean on was my family of origin. But my family of origin has told me, go back, make the marriage work, and remember their children. And this is what eats 95% of women, oh, have children and they need an education, nitawapeleka wapi, where will I take my children? And so because you don't have a backup from the society, and the society is telling you vumilia, and you know what, I can even add to this and say, there are cases I've had where the mothers have said, but what has Auntie bought for you?
Yes.
You've got a good
Everything,
car.
yeah.
And a beautiful house. I keep telling them, never got married to the car. You never got married to the house. And that was not a substitute for beating. So I think we need also to empower our own people so that they can learn and understand that irrespective of what my mother says, irrespective of what her generation said, I am an enlightened woman.
To what level should this go, Bishop? I know it's a delicate balance. You address some of these issues constantly, because in most cases we'll run to church even before we think counselors, because there's an assumption that counselors are expensive. And so getting to that point, and I have sat in such a session where there was violence, the home was no longer a safe space for these two individuals, and one wanted out. And even before they wanted out, it is now the church that looks and says, you know what, there's a problem here. And they seem to be comfortable staying together, but something is amiss. And so it is the pastor who advises that, how about you try separation? And the man is up and says, this is totally unacceptable. A pastor cannot be sitting here telling us of how I should break my home, or how we should break this home and everything. At what point should we strike a line or a balance? And to what level should we speak of this scenario where we tell them, you know what, it is not working, step out?
Thank you. That's a great question. To start with, we don't give people solutions as to what they're going to do. We don't make the decisions for them.
Yes. Okay.
When they come to us, we don't make decisions for them. We only help them make them decisions. We give them the information. We guide them, and then we show them the various options they have. We show them the choices. We also show them the consequences, and then we leave them to make the decisions. The reason we do that is because over time we have seen that there are people who today will be having in a kind of violence that, in your view, as a person listening, they should have separated yesterday. But shortly after, they are just together, embracing each other and blaming the pastor and saying that that pastor wanted us to separate. And basically, you only saw the dangers. So we do that. And if there's anything that really baffles me, it is how people relate in families. At one time, they are enemies. They don't want to talk to each other. Somebody has been threatened even with a knife, literally. And you have come in, you have tried to help them talk over the situation, and they are so angry, nobody wants to listen to the other. But when you leave, after a few days, you see them coming to you together. And from a church perspective, we do believe in forgiveness. We do believe in reconciliation. We do believe in things working even when they don't seem to work. We do believe all things are possible with God. But there are also some extreme cases where you'll totally see a risk. This is quite a risk. If you are threatened today, you are threatened tomorrow. And because we have also read the stories of people who have even killed each other. They don't just wake up one morning and do it. You will also, that is when we begin to talk about something and say, oh, he had said he would kill somebody. They keep saying all the time, I'll kill somebody. I think those red flags needs to be seen in a situation that is leading to violence or even death. And then people make the decisions of what they want to do.
All right.
Yes.
Well, telltale signs is one thing that we'd want to come and talk about, how to troubleshoot that now this is no longer a place to be, and maybe it is time that we exit the stage. That aspect of, trying to balance the time and say, it's okay, well, it has been happening, it's been this way constantly for 3 years. We might as well say that maybe things are not going to change. How do we get to strike that balance? I think we come and discuss that after this short break. Welcome back to the broadcast. Still with me, Dr. Jane Kimani, who's a counselor, and we have Bishop David Dagana as we ponder some more on the rising domestic violence as witnessed, in the recent past, courtesy of COVID-19, and the fact that now people have been locked together at home, and so it appears as though they are getting to meet new faces they are not used to. It's such a sad state of affairs, because if you look at the numbers that have been projected across the globe, then it means there's more of a deep-rooted problem that we certainly need to address. And sometimes it's violent, but we do not even know that it's violence. We all are thinking that violence is physical.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's something that really gets you uncomfortable, but you have no idea that it is. So how do we get to know that this is violence? This is violence that has taken longer than expected. At this point, it is time to say goodbye. Or at this point, maybe we should give it a try and see whether there's going to be any change.
Yeah, we also have verbal violence, verbal abuse. It's a form of violence because it violates your state as a human being. And there are people who will say, I've never hit my wife, but the kind of things, or women, and especially that women also do it quite often. And there are many cases of verbal abuse where perhaps somebody has beaten you down on the inside with words. And you look at a person who had a lot of confidence, a lot of self-will, a lot of hope, and suddenly they've just been beaten down on the inside, because that's what words do. We've also got economic violence. Yes, where somebody is either mistreated, manhandled so much financially, and gets to a point where you feel like this is it. The gentleman or the woman has refused to work, and when they work, they refuse to contribute anything. And you're there sorting out the family from day one, the rent, everything. That's also economic violence. And I want especially to talk about the physical violence. When it comes to a point where somebody says, I will hit you, I will kill you, or one day you will see. I keep saying what you call the slip of the tongue, according to psychology, that is a real truth.
Okay.
That's the real truth. It's actually, it is actually truth in its raw form. Because the mind didn't get time to perhaps edit the truth. And when somebody perhaps is drunk or somebody is angry, that's when they talk their real selves. And when they say, one day I'm going to hit you hard, I'm going to kill you, it's a time to note a red flag that this person potentially can do this. When somebody attempts it, I keep saying your life is very precious. It is so precious beyond even the institution of marriage. Because so many people say, what will people say in the society? I need to have the title that I'm married. But my concern is this: will you have the title when your back is broken? Or when perhaps you have read you as part of the statistics? When people get of that, I say the first thing, get an intervention, a second party intervention. That's why perhaps you can involve either family, it could be either religious setup, the person in your religious setup, it could be counselors, and especially I talk of somebody who understands the family very well, and especially understands the psychology of both men and women, and let that issue get addressed immediately. If a person hits you and threatens you with a knife, even report it to the police.
All right. Well, and speaking of reporting it to the police, Amnesty International says there is public outage about the institutional failures to deliver justice for gender-based violence. If not gender-based violence, then domestic violence. And, we have a Domestic Violence Act too, that is 2015, that explicitly states that victims may lay criminal complaints against offenders. But even as we do that, not much is being done. The public is almost getting to a point where they say enough is enough. You see how there's outage online, especially when such cases are reported. Do you realize, or do you have a feeling that maybe it will get to a point where it will be no longer about the courts, it will be no longer about the law, it will be about the public coming out to, say what? Enough is enough. Maybe is at that point that Dr. Jane was speaking about, where we all say, as society, now it will be an affair. Not forgetting that we've gotten to that point whereby we used to have a setup of home where I'd take care of Jane's child when I get them doing something wrong. But now it's a phase where it is every man for himself.
Yes, and I go back to what Dr. Jane said as a big solution, empowering the people.
Okay.
I think if we did proper empowering of the people, everyone, we empower all the way from the boy child, the girl child, the community, the society. They know their rights. They know how to identify those red flags when it is time to go to a counselor, when it is time to talk about it. When we do that, we will probably get back to where we were in the traditional society, where people went through a lot of domestic violence, but yet it was handled in a way that we still grew. And I don't know whether it's the reporting that probably media was not as much then, but we didn't really hear of it. But we grew, sure. And we grew through those difficult moments, and people knew how to handle it. People knew how to handle the situation. If we could probably empower people and to get something, a backup, like the traditional structures that were there, where sometimes people knew how to handle. I remember, like my grandmother, not once I heard her say, my white hair will not be shaved in this home.
Okay.
I'll not once, not twice. My white hair will not be shaved in this home.
Okay.
But she died in that home at 90 something, and
the white hair was shaved there.
It was shaved and it grew, and it got shaved and it grew.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not saying this to say that we justify people to stay in a domestic violent environment, but I have also seen that the modern society and the marriages we are having and the people, sometimes people come in when one leg is in, the other one is out, that they are done onto your mark, that as soon as I hear anything, however little it is, I'm taking off. It's like trial and error, and I want to leave. To the extent that sometimes when they are making their marriage vows and you ask them whether they will do, instead of saying I do, they say I'll try. So because really they are not in it to stay.
Right.
And there's something that my wife keeps saying many times when she's doing the counseling, and I think is a message that every young person needs to understand when they are getting into marriage, that you need to get into it having made a decision that you want to stay, so that you make it work. And every person have got a part to make it work.
Yeah.
So this empowerment that will come through the premarital counseling, that will come through the enlightening of the community and everyone else, probably it will get us to a point whereby people will be able to handle the violence and not get to a point where people are killing each other or injuring each other.
Law of attraction. That you walk into that marriage and you keep visualizing negativity. You keep seeing a scenario of, I was told by his kinsmen, by his cousins, by his neighbors back at home that he wasn't a good boy from the word go. And therefore, who am I to even imagine that I would be changing this character? Do we attract what it is that we think about?
You know what? We are who we think. The good book says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. So whatever you think in your heart, so do you reap. And I keep saying this one thing. Many times we look at a situation, and as the situation here being marriage, with hopes and expectations. There is nobody who gets into marriage hoping that one day I'm going to be beaten, one day I'm going to be this, and one day I'm going to be the other, until you start seeing red flags, and you ask now from the kinsmen, as you say, the attraction, and they tell you, what, this family is like that. I know it starts with a larger family. So many people feel so helpless. If the uncle, the great-grandmother, whoever, they were like this, who am I to change a situation?
Well, let's be honest for a moment. Sometimes when it's more family inclined, is that a cause for alarm? Is it to say that, yes, if the dad was like this, the characters would easily translate to this other party? And
now let me answer that very well. I want to say acquired characteristics are not inherited. Whatever you sow is not in your bloodline.
Okay.
It's not in your DNA. You just, children are born very clean, tabula rasa, as clean as a slate. Whatever they saw in their family setup, being the first place of learning, is what now they engulf and is who they become. You are taught by the best, who is your father and your mother, Okay, that's your first immediate. But there are some people who go through the same situation and they say, I saw this, I hated it. I purpose not to become that. So we may not necessarily say that from this kind of a family will breed this kind of a child, because we even have Christian or godly families that bring up criminals and bring up rebellious children. So it is a lot about the self-will. And I say this to every woman who is marrying a man. At times as women, we know what provokes the anger. Let's just be very real. We know what provokes that anger. We know, the power is so much in us. We are so powerful that you can actually change a man by your own conduct.
Yeah.
Because when we know what actually affects that man to behave that way, the only thing you need to do is not to pray for wisdom and understand.
And it works.
It does. I've been there for 20 plus years.
Okay.
The wisdom does work. And you get to understand, if I live my life this way, then this man, there's a level in today's society where women do not want to compromise. I'm learned, I'm this, I've got my degrees, so you come, it's you to, yes, in marriage, there's got to be compromise. But who needs to go lower? Let me tell you, it doesn't mean that you've got to go down and get beaten and get mistreated. With your rights, with knowledge, and with everything. When a woman takes a position as a woman, things begin to line up in the house.
Okay.
I can talk of many countless men who say, I used to be this, but the nature of my wife, the character of my wife won me over. And today they're very different. But what do? We give up very quickly. Number two, you also begin to reason, if their family is like that, who am I now? I'm a grasshopper in this institution. I'll be too small to change the situation. So I want to say, when it gets to a point that you've done your best and nothing has changed, that's when you can say, I can walk out with my pride. But are we saying you walk out? No. We're telling you, do your best and get empowered by the right people. Keep the right company. For us women, we are so changed by what we hear from our friends. Oh, tell you, oh, like that, I can't stay there for a day. No, get the company that tells you it's going to work, the men are good, marriages are good. The same thing with men. Let them sit around men who tell them Gashungwa is not the way to go.
Okay.
Violence is not the way to go. So it gets to a position where you've got to change position by changing the people you align with. When you change the people you align with, then your life begins to line up.
Okay.
Yeah, and I want to speak to that mentality, victim mentality, that I got married to a place where they do this, and you start counting that even the wife of the elder brother never lived here, the one of the second one, so am I, so you conclude, so am I. I think what Dr. Jenny is saying is something that we really need to, nobody is a victim of circumstance in that marriage institution. You have the opportunity to change that. All of us are products of certain past, some painful, some not very good, but we can refuse to become prisoners of our future. We have the opportunity to change. We cannot live as victims of pasts. And here again, we go back to the many young people probably listening to us today and say, before you get into that institution, take some time, understand it, not just get to know each other properly. That's why we appreciate the roles that are played by counselors in preparing people for premarital counseling and getting them to understand the big picture. Because with the young people, once you see somebody you meet somewhere in a party or a bash or school or wherever, and you feel you want, this is my wife or my husband, you have not seen the other side of the person.
Hold it right there.
You've never seen that other side.
Hold it right there. I'm coming back to that point. Andrew from Nairobi calls us this morning. Andrew, how are you?
I'm fine.
Yes, let's hear your contribution to the subject.
So I had a question.
Yes.
Can I go ahead?
Please do.
How do somebody negotiate and how do somebody solve violence from infertility without somebody navigating infertility?
Did you get that question? How do you differentiate between violence and an aspect of disability? Is that it? Andrew, did we get it right?
No.
Yes. What is the question again? I can't hear you well.
The question is,
yeah?
how do you solve violence coming from infertility?
How do you solve violence coming from
instability?
Instability. Ah, okay. Infertility.
Infertility. Yeah.
Well, that's a deep one.
That's
a deep one.
Or it depends on who is going through the infertility stage, because it can be either the male or the female. And in case it is a woman, she should not be beaten for not being able to produce. You know, there are things that you stand up to and you say, this one I refuse. Because many times the root of that violence because of infertility is somebody who is saying, when you go to the root, I want to push you out of your comfort, live my life, I get somebody else who can be productive.
Yes.
So the violence there is speaking a language, because anytime there is violence, there is a language, a brutal language that is being spoken. This is somebody saying, I'm trying to get you out of my life, move out of my life, I need somebody who can do this. Number two, it is saying, I'm disappointed with you. And this is something nobody can change. It is there is nobody who desires to be at that state of life. And number three, it is saying, my people want somebody who can bring me a child. Therefore, you are causing shame to my life. So that is a language, the brutal language of that violence. And when it comes to violence because of infertility, I keep saying, that person who married you and is beating you because you are infertile, they were not serious about loving you. I tell people, you love this man, you love this woman, whether or not there is a child, then you look for an option beyond that. There's adoption and the rest. So when it gets to that stage of violence, it means that if anything else goes wrong in your life, this person can murder you or anything. That's a point where I say you need now to go for a therapy, the two of you, and when you need to know, as you who is being beaten, as you who is going through different stages of violence, you need to ask yourself, is this a person worth living with?
And I need to add to speak to men and go back to the cultural issue again. I do not understand why. From my experience, the men are the ones I have found assuming that when there's an infertility problem, that it must be a problem with the wife. And I have case after case issues I've listened to. And you hear the words of Dr. Jane here, says, I want a child, my family wants a child. The man feels like, I am okay myself. I think the men need to understand that this is a biological function that can be for both sides. And there are a number of times when the men themselves are the problem. And yet they continue meting this violence to their wives. And going back to where we started again, when we said when the men are subjected to violence, they don't want to speak about it because of the stigma. We would want to encourage the men when there is infertility issues or problems that they need to seek the medical advice first. Some don't even take the first step of even going to find out. They tell the wife, you go and be checked. You have a problem, go and be checked. And even when the wife goes and the wife is checked, and it's sometimes
confirmed that they are not the problem.
Yes, it's confirmed that it's not the problem, and this guy doesn't even want to make that step of going. He's living in denial. Some even go to the extent of going to be checked alone out there, but they continue meting the violence to the women. I have about 3-4 cases which I have dealt with. So our men need to understand that this is a biological thing. It can be any side.
Yes. Can I just add something to this?
Yes, as we close.
Most men will not go to the hospital. They go to look for a side chick to see if he can impregnate her.
Yes.
And if she doesn't get pregnant, and you see now, that is making the family setup even more broken. So what do most men do? They say, I got this one because my wife couldn't give birth. Really? So you find he was going to check on his state by trying to see, can this one sire? Could the problem be? So when it doesn't work outside there, now he comes back to the wife and tells the wife, it is you who knows where my problem began.
Andrew, I hope your question is answered. Time is not on our side. You brought this point of where people are getting married without knowing each other, and it just got me again back to the marginalized communities where the setup, it's a setup that conforms you to actually get married to a person that you do not know, and it is agreed upon family, and therefore when you get there, the situation is bad and you do not know where to run to. Well, there's one conversation that has been there as to how you get, safe spaces for these individuals, how you create safe spaces within the society where these individuals can run to. are we doing so well in such a scenario as a country, looking at how we have numerous marginalized communities as we close?
I think absolutely not. I wish that question and the answer could go back mashinani, because there are no safe places beyond even in the marginalized. We even need to get a safe place where anybody who is battered can run or threatened can run to, spend a night and get counselors, because most of them have got nowhere to go. They will stick there and it happens as they wait for morning. So I think we need even to have places where people can be open enough to talk to and address issues. However, most religious, I can say like churches, you know, I'm also a pastor, so there are many churches that have opened doors where people can come and have people to talk to. And I think the church ministers, I'll challenge them, be available and keep off a lot of security so that people feel like you're reachable.
Wow.
Yes, there's a lot to do. Probably in a scale of 1 to 10, we could probably give ourselves 3 out of 10, because in the marginalized areas, they are actually marginalized in every way. Well, we appreciate the devolution thing, and so the roads are beginning to go there and some services. Yeah. But when it comes to empowering the people there, we have a long way to go. That's why when I decided to go to serve among the unleashed, Turkana, Samburu, Marsabit, and other places like that, I wanted to empower those communities so that they have equal rights to compete even with the mega opportunities. And people in a village in Lodwar called Katuman in 2004 told me, can you bring school here to us so that we can be employed in Nairobi and other places like the Kenyans are? Can you bring school like the Kenyans are? I said, you're Kenyans. They actually said, really? They did not believe they were Kenyans. They did not believe that they have equal opportunities. Today as we speak, well, some of the children there are, one of the boys is a doctor, and he decided to become he decided to become a doctor because he said all his parents were suffering the teeth problem, pain using the herbs. He wanted to become a dentist, and he became, and he has become since then. So it is possible, it can be done, and the church is in the forefront of doing that, because we have a call to those unleashed people groups. We have a call to the people who are marginalized. This week, GOA, we are celebrating 30 years of ministry. And one of the things that we are excited about is to see the people empowered in those villages coming up and what they can become. They have great potential. Great potential.
Wow.
Yes.
So much feedback coming our way, but time would not allow us to go through. Word of advice from me, I do not know. The church setup, honestly, is one that very many people used to run to when they have all these terrible experiences. But today, it is one that is dreaded, because, you know, once you're married in church with that wedding, and everyone celebrates that, how you go back to that church to tell them that, you know, it did not work, and the talk that will be in that church is one thing. I know we have so much that we can talk about on this particular subject, but then let's leave it at that as we look forward to another session where we will have conversations as to making and shaping